Is your life predetermined, with your fate written in the stars? Or was William Henley correct when he ended his poem Invictus, one of the most famous in modern history, with the line, "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul"? Today, we find out the answer to this very question by gazing through the lens of personality psychology with an expert in this very field, as well as a dear friend to the show and, well, to me personally, Dr. Daniel Franz. My name is Matthew Lostaglia, and I am the host of the Real Resilience podcast. This show is my journey to understand the link between individual resilience, our need for connection, and improving culture in the workplace. Dr. Franz may be the most prolific expert and clinician in logotherapy on the planet, as he's one of only 1,700 people worldwide. This is according to my very scientific research conducted on LinkedIn, hence why I'm Matt and he's Dr. Franz. Or as we have come to cheerfully refer to him on the show, Dr. Dan. He is also an MBTI certified practitioner, which is quite helpful when it comes to this conversation. He's also a mental health and clinical addictions counselor. Now, Dr. Dan and I talk about what your personality looks like and why it may seem to change when you're really happy and when you're very stressed out. Dan also reveals secrets I never knew about personality and how it impacts our ability to communicate with each other. Specifically, we dive into how introverts and extroverts both process information and communicate, and why it typically ends in complete and utter disaster. And most importantly, what it is that you can do about it, even if you're not in a position of official authority or leadership. Now, another really fun and exciting element I've added to Real Resilience is audience questions. Now, I put out a series of posts asking my LinkedIn people what they wanted to know about personality, and if they could ask questions to an expert free of cost, what would they want to know? I'll tell you what, we had some really amazing questions come in, and we got to as many as we could, which really brought this conversation to a new level. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Dr. Dan about personality. So, okay, let's take people back.
Yeah. To the episode you didn't get to listen to.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Here's some behind the scenes from previous behind the scenes. So where I came at this from, how this meeting came into fruition, all started with I'm taking a personality psychology of personality class, and the instructor, the professor, is actually phenomenal. He's a great guy, and the material is great. And I don't know what it was. It was one of those. It was like a thought virus that overcame me when something came up and somebody was talking. It was probably listening to a podcast, and somebody had said something about horoscopes, and they were kind of tongue in cheek, discussing the veracity of horoscopes. And so I thought about it, and I was like, well, I guess I've always had this lingering idea in my head that's like, I can assume any personality trait, or I can take ownership, like me personally, Matthew, can assume any personality trait and can go back into my personal history and say, yeah, I'm totally an introvert based on X, Y, and Z data, or I'm completely an extrovert based on ABC data. And so that's where that links to the horoscope, because I feel like it was the same thing. Like when I remember the first time, I was probably like 10 years old, and my sister walked in the room and she was like, "Oh, hey, you're a Leo. Doesn't this make total sense?" And I read it and I was like, yeah, that's me all day. Like I'm the ham. I need to be in the center of attention. Like I'm that guy. Go figure, on a podcast,
Well, a couple things really quick. I want to jump in.
Yeah.
The idea that, as you said, you can assume any personality trait. Of course, right? And that's probably part of the issues in definition. Traits, how many different personality traits are there out there? I believe the last list I saw was about 500 defined traits, right? Traits, different aspects of personality. But when we talk about personality, what personality truly is an enduring pattern of behaviors, attitudes, values, and yes, traits that kind of become who we are. They define us. We know, right? If somebody were to say, hey, are you hanging out with Matthew today? Like, yeah, I picture this guy, gregarious, extroverted, big beard, good looking hair, not always a whiz with the video, but we're getting past that. Sorry, but I got to let that go. I'm going to let that go. I'll let it go. Right? But personality is that enduring pattern of who we are that forms, I would say, from birth with attachment and all these other kinds that nature and nurture combine to become who we are. Can we exist? Can we live? Can we exhibit other traits? Absolutely. Absolutely. But our personality is uniquely ours.
I think that's a beautiful place to start. And actually, I'm gonna jump straight into a guest question, or not a guest, but an audience question, because that goes so perfectly with what a friend of the show, Jared L, asked. He asked, and this, you'll see, this segues perfectly. He says, what effect does stress have on our personality? Do we double down on our most basic traits? And I'm going to change that and tell me if this is acceptable. Do we double down on our strongest or our most dominant personality traits? And does it differ between personality types? So those are the kind of three questions kind of packaged into one. But based on what you were talking about with the enduring sense of this, like I think about what do I typically do when things are tough, when things are great, and when things are just forgettable, the day-to-day.
Yeah, so I'm going to defer to answer in the form of my favorite personality assessment, as you know, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI. We call that, actually there's a great, I can't remember if it's a book or study material, I've got plenty of copies. We call it being in the grip of our dominant function, or our dominant preferences. And think about it, I mean, there's a lot of ways we can define that. Depending on the more stressed we are, the more we rely on the parts of us that we're most comfortable with. So if we're stressed out and we're a thinking, planning person, well then we're gonna defer to some hyper rationality, maybe over planning. Stress might make us appear rigid and inflexible. If those are if you're a rational thinking kind of planning person, all of a sudden when you're stressed out, you might need to have your day planned down within 15-second increments, right, or 15-minute increments, and you might lose the ability to become flexible and spontaneous and things like that. So yes, the answer to the question is simply yes, but more specifically, we defer to what we're comfortable with, what our most dominant functions, what our most dominant preferences are, and sometimes we can exhibit those kind of negatively. When we're less stressed, or when we have better management of our stress, we're able to be more flexible and to, as you were saying, to resort to other aspects of our personality that we may not be as strong with, but might be more suited for the situation. Yeah. Sure. So, I mean, we can go with your example of traits, right? Sometimes, just when we're less stressed, our brain's working more optimally, we're able to think and flex in our behavior, our attitudes, our abilities. Yeah, we can be more resourceful that way and defer to other aspects of our personality, maybe not as strong. Going back to the Myers-Briggs, any introvert can behave as though an extrovert. Any extrovert can behave as though an introvert. It just takes energy. So a stressed out introvert, or person with preferences towards introversion, you're not going to want to put them on a stage in front of a couple thousand people. right? They are not going to perform well, more than likely, because if they're stressed, they're going to defer to their more dominant characteristics and really need that time away from big groups of people. Back to the judging and perceiving, right? Are people with tendencies towards P or perceiving are your options thinkers, right? They appear very spontaneous. They really enjoy, I always imagine them just in a world of stars, and the stars are all the options for them to make a decision with. When they are at their best, they can look at all those options and make really, really great decisions. When they are stressed, all those options are presented and they enjoy all those options, and making a decision can seem restrictive and debilitating and very difficult.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I'm so torn. I am starting to believe, and I'm not gonna go down the rabbit hole of like a personal assessment here. We'll do that offline.
Well, let's do that.
When I become a paid client.
Let's use the podcast for therapy time. Come on, bring it on.
Exactly. Let's go. So it's interesting because the more that I think about this and kind of pay attention to myself, like the way that I've always answered the survey questions, and this is actually, I think I want to dive into. You did a phenomenal job last time of breaking down why MBTI or why any personality theory is like where it was rooted from, how we came up with the data, what makes us able to rely on it as something that's consistent, and kind of the clinical trials, or the experiments that took place in the beginning that got us to where we are now with our
dude. What I just heard there is no pressure to repeat the previous performance.
Yeah, no
pressure at all. Man, I'm gonna have to come up with some amazing job.
There's literally no way you can repeat it, but good luck.
Right. So go ahead and try, therapy boy.
But so it's interesting because the introvert extrovert thing for me is probably the most interesting in myself, because it's like I have to think about stress in flavors, because I can, like, if I'm getting ready to go speak publicly, that's stressful, even for me. And I view that as necessary, as it's telling me that this is important, right? And I'm meant to take it seriously, because I'm holding a bunch of people's attention, and I want to make sure that they're walking away with something valuable and that they're entertained, during it, because that's part of the game. So, but like going into that, it's a different flavor of stress versus like, oh crap, I ran out of money in my bank account, or something like that. Like it's a different kind of thing, and the result of the different types of stress will evoke a different reaction from me, depending on the situation. Like sometimes it's I need to retreat, and I need to go into the office and be alone, and then and work this out, and kind of go into that 15-minute increment. Next 15 minutes, nothing is touching my attention except for this. And then there's other times where I'm really stressed. Right now I have 50 clients, 50 small business clients that I'm working with. I'm a little stressed because I want to make sure that I'm delivering for them, but my reaction to this stress is to go and have great long conversations with other business advisors about strategies and tips and how they're managing and all of these other things. And that alleviates the stress for me in those situations. So it's very interesting that I am an introvert in some of those, but this goes, I think that this goes to the idea that you are not E or I. There's the spectrum, right? And I think that's where people might get lost with the idea of personality, and they just think like, I'm an extrovert, and so I will disregard this.
Let me jump in right there, just with that idea, right? Even when I do an MBTI assessment and you get the full spectrum, when I give you that report, it isn't this or that. It's presented on a spectrum. Where are you strongest in all of these preferences? And again, reminder, MBTI is personality preferences, how you best operate. It is not hard and fast personality constructs, right? But it's a spectrum. Where do you operate the best? Everybody can flex to the area they're not the strongest at. It just takes more energy. And I would comment on your point about stress. One of the factors I heard in what you said is stress that we are adept, that we know how to handle and manage. Public speaking is a stress that we can enjoy, embrace, and may recover from better and faster. Stress that may not have a cause, may be unpredictable, may be unmanageable, like all of a sudden there's zero in your bank account and you're like, I didn't spend that. Who stole my ID? Or who stole my debit card? Or who's spending all of this, right? That's maybe less manageable stress, and that's going to have a different impact on us as well. Probably a more powerful impact.
That makes a ton of sense. That's and so that's interesting in the level of, so it's more of less of a sense of flavor and more of a sense of degree in relation to the sense of control over the situation and familiarity.
Maybe even mastery, we could call it, right?
Right.
Because you know, the more you engage in public speaking, the more I engage in public, the better you get at it. It becomes easier and easier. I read a great article recently by the number 2 guitarist of all time. Do you want to guess who that might be?
Oh gosh, the number 2? According to who? This is
according to Guitar Magazine, as reported by Cigar Aficionado magazine.
Slash.
Ooh, dang close. Same genre. I would say better guitarist.
Ooh, enlighten me.
James Hetfield of Metallica. Right? Of course. Duh. Right? Like,
honestly, that wouldn't, I'd like to be completely transparent though, that wouldn't have been my next probably 2-3 guesses just in this moment in time. I don't know why.
Because
like
there's
that,
so many of them. He states like he is a huge introvert, very, very shy. But, I mean, how many shows has he performed in his lifetime? And he says I am far more comfortable in front of 20 or 30 or 50,000 people than I am just sitting down talking to somebody one-on-one. Mastery. And master of puppets. Had to sneak that in.
No, that's really good. And I think it's an interesting consideration that just kind of veering away from personality, just the idea of group settings and how we engage with groups and group dynamics is that when you are, I was just reading about, facilitation, was it group? It doesn't matter. At any rate, I'm going to veer off to a concept that I can't remember and can't name right now, so it's not going to be helpful. And I'm doing better at reeling myself in.
Ooh. Sounds like a challenge for me to take us on some tangents.
Right, let's go. I will say that everyone genuinely missed out on Sigmund Freud's appearance last time on the show.
I was going to get it. We'll have to do it again. Today's a client, clinical, and coaching day. I have to go into the office after this. Could not harness the power of Sigmund today to dress like him, but next time I surely will.
That's awesome.
And also, I actually, really quick, I wanted to tell you, I got a very stern lecture after that when I left the Dr. Dan cave and went back into the Dr. Dan household. I was told, I really don't like when you do voices, and I just don't think that's very professional. And I said, yes, dear, but I was asked to she would be horrified to know I'm talking about her on the podcast. But don't edit that out, though.
This is not going to go to thousands of people, I swear. Okay.
Oh, we can hope.
Okay. Oh my gosh, that's so good. That is good data.
So, I mean, she's not here right now. That's why I can't do Sigmund. I'll have to wait for her to be back upstairs.
All right. So when we're thinking, if we're going back in time and we're looking at the history of personality and our understanding of it, what
why are they
studies
different than
took place?
horoscopes?
Right.
Right? I see where we're going.
Where did the deviation come from?
Well, from soothsayers and fortune tellers for hundreds of... No, so if we go to the pinnacle of personality assessment, not the MBTI, but we'll dive into that really quick since it's my favorite, right? MBTI comes out of World War II. We have thousands of young men volunteering for the military or being drafted, and we quickly and effectively need to figure out where will they best fit. If they're not volunteering, nobody knows exactly what's where and who is needed for what positions. So we need some kind of assessment material, and we start to figure out this new-ish field of psychology might help us to understand that. So that is the birth of some of the first assessments in ability and personality, so we can help with placement for job duties. From there, two amazing women, Ms. Myers and Ms. Briggs, I believe mother and daughter pair. Some Jungian psychologists, right? So they love Carl Jung and the archetypes, king, warrior, magician, lover, all this. They start to do some of his research, pull in some of this World War II research, and they come up with the different pairings of introvert, extrovert, sensing and feeling, or intuitive and sensing, thinking and feeling, judging and perceiving. From there, right? They don't just put these ideas out there and say, okay, this, take this test and we'll tell you what you are. But the research goes on. It's normed, it's validated, the reliability is proven to figure out, right, if it measures what it's truly supposed to measure. They did that along the lines of the most famous personality assessment, the true, this thing is meant to assess mental illnesses and mental disorders, the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. And this has been administered hundreds of thousands of times in different languages, because it is meant to pull out true personality constructs. And what we've done, why it is reliable and valid, this was not a class I did well with in grad school, right? That's why I'm not a research psychologist. I'm a therapy psychologist. Those research psychologists, they really love their numbers and their triple, quadruple blind studies, case studies, right? So there's a whole field of psychology, psychometrics, and all these things that goes into the mathematical assessment of why these things are real and valid. What we did with the MMPI, we used case studies and clinical measures. We assessed a group of standard healthy civilian individuals, as well as a prison population, and compared neuroses and illnesses and all these things over the course of thousands upon thousands of times to make sure that what these constructs, these questions, that they measure what we truly want them to measure. Meanwhile, some individual potentially named Jim Bob down at the local newspaper wrote your horoscope and said, well, this sounds like a good idea to define Matthew, and sorry, that's a terrible accent, right? Like, I think there might be a little bit more to the study of writing horoscopes, but it certainly isn't a mathematical field proving with data sets and all that kind of stuff.
Right. I've recently heard, and not to go off on a tangent on horoscopes, I've recently heard some people that I highly respect that lean heavily on horoscopes, which is baffling to me from the outset, and it's not something I'm willing to spend my time looking into the why.
Yeah, horoscopes themselves I don't want to bash too much, but there's a whole area of study that moon cycle, I sound like I'm coming out of a bad episode of The League, but there is something to be said about those things that affect personality and behavior that we may not fully understand or can measure. I know when I worked at a campus for adolescent treatment, right, we treated about 200 children on a daily basis, right? They were in different cottages. They lived with us for certain periods of time. I was a supervisor, so I was in charge of walking cottage to cottage, we called them, to make sure everybody was behaving and nobody was acting out and things weren't crazy and staff were doing what they were supposed to. And we knew, no kidding, after doing this for several years, nights of a full moon, we were going to be working really hard with inappropriate behavior and acting out. And it really was, it's anecdotal information, But anybody, nurses will tell you this. People that work in different behavior treatment centers will tell you, oh yeah, full moons mess with human beings.
Let's go. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it because I am a firm believer that there is so much more going on than the way that we have accrued data about how we live has allowed us to see so far. And I don't know if it's self-restriction or if it's just, the way that we developed our technology in this particular way has put not blinders, but has geared our focus towards one way. And so I'm curious. I try to remain as open-minded as possible when it comes to the different aspects. And when it comes to the professional side, is what are we doing? What do we know that we can implement that makes real tangible changes? And so, like, I know a gal who's wonderful, and she does Danny the Witch, I think is like her moniker, and she does amazing work and helps a lot of people do a lot of incredible stuff. That's like, get it. Go get it. If you're seeing real tangible benefits in your life because you're getting that coaching in the classes and you're understanding things and that's helping you operate, go get it. And that what allows me to segue with you into, let's bounce from the historical to present day applications of personality theory. So for you, when you're doing, like, explain the different ways, I guess, that you use or see, like, the application of this, and what are we trying to accomplish when we're bringing this into, we can start with like an individual. Like if you're working with a client who's coming in for help, where does the psychology of personality come into play? How do you use it?
Well, first of all, I love the MBTI. I use it, I don't know, daily, a couple times a day when I'm working, even in my personal life. So using the MBTI, right, can help me first help an individual, either clinically or in a coaching setting, right, in a business setting, first understand themselves better, how they best appreciate operating in the world in an introverted or extroverted sense, how they make decisions, how they take in information, what their best styles of learning might be, different aspects of how they communicate. And from there, we can look at other important parts of their life. How, I use this when I did a lot of couples therapy in the past. The MBTI was instrumental in helping a couple understand their differences and then how to communicate around those. So take that in just a dyad of two people, right? Then we take, my favorite thing, man. I love taking this into the business world and administering it to an entire team of people and looking at like the systems of communication, how people manage conflict, right? Because in a healthy work environment, you must have conflict and have it resolved in a healthy way. And so for people to understand how they communicate and how they communicate conflict and how they move from conflict to agreement, oh man, it's so much fun. I just get jazzed talking about it. So that's a couple aspects there.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I think that conflict in the workplace is perhaps underrated or viewed at in a negative fashion. Mm-hmm. But if it's done right, and I'm curious about the doing right from your perspective, if it's done in a thoughtful manner, that is how I think that's like the best weapon to use against groupthink.
Oh, beautifully stated. Absolutely.
So, because and especially if you have a really strong authoritative leader who has that strong personality, directive, and they're going to let you know the way that they think, and that's very much, and they're kicking off a meeting like that. Like, this is what we're going to talk about, and this is how I feel about it. All right, let's discuss.
Well, I would challenge you to say that's probably not a great leader.
Exactly. Strong. They can be strong, and they can be decisive, and so you could take you can make big moves right? But it's hard to change course.
Yeah, you can be strong and decisive, but if you're deciding only based on what you think, well, why the hell bother having a team, right? A strong, decisive leader, to be effective, needs to take in other people's thoughts, opinions. And if you're the strong, decisive, extroverted leader, and you're busy talking all day long, or through that entire meeting, and you don't let a single introvert say what they need to say, well, that's going to be groupthink. Right? It's not even going to be groupthink. It's going to be single-think, right?
Yeah. Talk more about that communication difference between extroverts and introverts.
Sure. Well, and real quick, like the whole idea of business, right? For a business to be, for any organization, but especially businesses, corporations, to be most effective, you have to take all the ideas, get them out, have effective dialogue about them, which we can call conflict, because not all of the ideas should not match up, because then you're going to be subject to groupthink. Everybody gets to get their idea out. We sift through it. We communicate. We figure out which way we're going to go, and then everybody is accountable to the same idea. That's how organizations get results. But if too many people aren't communicating, or keeping it to themselves, or aren't being allowed to share what their opinion is or what their idea is, well, how are they going to stand up for it? How are they going to be held accountable for it? And if they're not held accountable, how are they going to get to those results? That's what I see in so many dysfunctional organizations today. Is everything's not on the table. We're not having healthy, effective conflict, and therefore you get infighting and backbiting and all these lack of accountabilities, right? So the difference between introverts and extroverts in communicating, just in that factor, the extroverts, you always know what an extrovert is thinking because it's coming right out of their mouth, right? Extroverts are external processors. The information that there's going on in their brain is coming right out. And that's so cool because you just don't always know what you're going to get out of an extrovert. They may not always know what they're going to say next, right? I've been victimized by that myself. So, on the other hand, introverts, they are internal processors. They are taking in that information and they can sit back and say, that's fascinating, in their own mind, right? And brewing through it and milling through it and percolating through it. And the cool thing is when they finally do speak, it's gold, right? Because they've processed it internally for so long and shaped it and formed it. It is wisdom. The problem is those damn extroverts just keep running their mouths and new ideas are constantly coming up and they rarely pause to even take a breath, much less ask somebody else, what do you think about that? And that's just a basic meeting tactic that so many groups need to know. Matthew, what is the most amount of time human beings are comfortable with in silence? 7 seconds. Damn, it's like we've done this before. You knew it. You remembered. That's actually correct. About 7 seconds. It's amazing. This is actually a skill I have to teach. You did your research. I've had to teach this to many students in counseling, psychology, and therapy, as well as many organizational groups and leaders. Silence can be very therapeutic, especially in a coaching setting, especially in an interrogation setting, right? If you're a police officer, silence is very effective, very therapeutic, just to allow somebody to sit and process their thoughts, but especially in a group meeting situation where introverts need to finish, stop taking in data from the extroverts. When the extroverts finally shut up, I can say that because I am one, and the introverts get to finish processing and shape those thoughts, well, then they can share them. But if there's just constant noise going on from all the extroverts chattering, the introverts are just going to continue to take in data and may need to go back, and that's where they sit back in their office and they're like, there goes those introverts going back to their holes. It's like, no. They need time to process and think and formulate coherent thoughts.
So when I'm thinking about a situation like brainstorming, like if you bring together a group of people that work within your organization, you're starting a project, you're like, we need some generative ideas. We need to invoke a sense of creativity in this group. How do we encourage introverts to participate in conjunction with extroverts, when we know when you're going in, and it's not like a blank slate, right? It's not like these people I haven't met before. You know that when you're going to say this idea, this person's going to have this type of response. How do we account for that, and how do we encourage not equal, because there is no such thing, but a higher level of participation rate from those who may be more hesitant to participate?
Well, first of all, I don't think we can always label those who with tendency towards introversion as shy. If we look at them as internal processors, that may look like they're shy, but if they've made it to a point that they're in an important meeting with a group of other people in an organization or corporation, they've obviously got some things going for them and they're able to verbalize. Sometimes it's just giving them time, right? Just a manner of, hey, allow them to take in information as the extroverts are talking and sharing their ideas. The introverts can take it in, but then you got to pause and ask them, okay, hey, what do you think about that? What's your opinion? Where are you coming from? I see you kind of thinking, and pause and allow them to share. It can be really helpful not to sell from the stage or give you sell the soap, but that's what I do, man. Like going into organizations and running a full battery of MBTI on whatever group you want to look at, whether it's 2 people or 10 people, and then identifying how those communication patterns work out so that we can say, okay, here's how you might want to structure your meetings differently to allow everybody to participate and to allow for the best optimal decisions, accountability, and results orientation.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. The idea that I had bouncing around in my head, I'm curious for your thoughts, is what are the cons you think? I think the pros are pretty obvious. What are the cons of implementing a sense of anonymity? If you do, maybe we're doing a more virtual style brainstorming session where we say, okay, we're launching this product and we need, 50 taglines or whatever for it. Throw stuff against the wall. We want the ideas, and we want to view all of them from an equal plane. So everyone throw it, write your idea down, throw it in the vase or whatever, send it to us an email where it gets anonymized. However,
well, I think you'll get a little bit more creativity with that. People might go out and be more daring. When you're looking for that kind of creative freedom, maybe anonymity can help. But I think when it comes down to the deciding factor, it really needs to be, everybody involved. That's an interesting question. I think it depends on what you're looking for, where anonymity would fit best, or how it would fit best.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And, just trying to encourage more involvement. And because in my head, I know that people are going into meetings. Everyone kind of has a feel of everyone else's personality, or maybe you have new people and they're like, I don't know, I don't know how this group's going to take new ideas. So if you're able to submit them in a way where, I can do this. And then even there's a point where okay, we all, 75% of us thought that this was a great idea. Whose idea was that? And then you'd be like, yeah, no, it was me. That's great work, And so it's not fully anonymized. Again, this is thinking on the fly, And
well, there's an interesting point there that when oh man, thinking on the fly, I totally lost what I was going to say. The idea of being able to choose. Oh, the idea that assuming how people are going to respond because you've spent time with them, or the group's been together for a long time. That's where something like a personality assessment or a group assessment or an MBTI can be really powerful to break those. It's either confirm those assumptions or to change them or to validate them or to help people see each other in a new light. It can be so powerful at that. I've been in teams that have been together for a decade or more. And at that point, you can assume there are some frustrations, maybe even some resentments between people. And to see people come to an understanding of oh, dang, that's why you behave that way. And now how can we interact differently or better or in a healthier way?
Yeah, that's That's the name of the game, right? That's why personality theory matters. That's because those are the type of difference in results that we can see, the way that we view each other, the way that we understand the behavior behind the actions that others are taking. That's where the rubber meets the road in my eyes, and that's it's interesting. It makes me think. So Manya Chylinski, we know, friend of the
Shout out to Manya. Outstanding podcast on her own.
oh my gosh, amazing. Oh, and not to mention, if you guys don't see in the background, Dr. Dan has an amazing podcast as well called The Meaning Project. He has incredible guests like me on there, so you should definitely check it out.
Absolutely.
All right, so Manya asked, what is behind different communication styles? I think, like, how do and this goes into what we were talking about. We've hit it from the kind of introvert, extrovert side and internal processing, external processing. What other components of the MBTI in particular can help inform us about communication styles?
Well, what can help us understand communication? I think part of her question was like, where do they, like, why do people communicate the way they do, right? Like, the idea of what causes this, and unfortunately, there's no simple answer, right? It's almost like any one of these personality components. Well, why do people behave that way? Well, the variability of human behavior is unbelievable, and that's one of the things about personality assessment and even personality traits and profiling. Like, these aren't always causal. Not 100% predictive. It can give us patterns and trends, but human behavior doesn't always operate according to 4 letters on a piece of paper that generate a spectrum. So why do people communicate the way they do? It's a variety of things. Nature and nurture from birth, interactions over time, and how they get there. That being said, people that may have learned unhealthy patterns of communication, or to Manya's quote, maybe frustrating patterns of communication, people that we struggle to communicate with, that can change. We can change our patterns to become more understanding and empathic of them. But also, that's the benefit of personality assessment and understanding. We can also change our own patterns and look at, oh, this is why I may struggle in certain areas, and this is why people don't understand me, or why I'm not being heard, or why I'm being perceived as aggressive in my communication. Maybe I should change some of these things.
That's a great segue into our next audience question. And from Sheree Kane Jones, another great dear friend of the show, and former guest for those who are keeping track. She asked a bunch of questions. So I picked one, and it seems like it fit right now. How can we manage the parts of our personality that do not serve us?
Ooh, well,
right?
I mean, that is I'm just going to answer that. Yeah, right. That's like, thank you, Sheree, because I'm going to just take that in the most self-serving way possible. Right? How do we do that? We talk to other people. We get a coach, a therapist, a mentor, a guide, somebody. And I think the important thing here is somebody with an objective point of view, trying to bounce around those ideas with a partner, a spouse, or a friend, even a good friend, right? My good friend, the Running Man from the Meaning Show podcast, right? Or the Meaning Project podcast, we call him the Running Man. Like, he's a great source of objective information when I'm maybe not behaving optimally. He will say to me, you're not behaving optimally. Actually, he'll say things like, wow, you need to quit being such a jackwagon and get your head out of the clouds. I'm like, thank you, Running Man. I appreciate that. But even he is somewhat subjective. You know, we've known each other for a long time, right? I'm going to asking my wife, hey, this part of my personality that I may not find consistent with the way I'd like to behave, what would you suggest I do about that? She's going to have equally interesting things to say. Whereas people, maybe more objective, somebody, again, an outsider, therapist, mentor, coach, is going to give you a perspective that ideally is more objective from their perspective, their training, their education, and their experience. So if there are aspects of your personality you want to adapt and change, like having a professional, an objective outsider help you with that is probably the quickest and most enjoyable, maybe for the therapist or coach, way to go about it.
I think that's a good point. It's hard to do this on your own. It may be more difficult, to your point, to do it with someone that you're intimately close with. And so when I think about, sometimes reaching out for help and making that step can be difficult for numerous reasons. There might be a taboo and internal consternation about seeking help in that regard, in which I would like to, I wish that I could just burst that bubble, but
I'm about to. Oh, thank you. Perfect segue. I wanted to do that, right? All right. So this goes back. I'm going to throw out a number. It's going to be totally inaccurate. Thousands of years into history. We'll go back to the ancient Greeks, right? Their most famous stories were about the hero's journey. And what's one of the main aspects of the hero's journey? Every hero has a mentor, right? So, right? My favorite, Luke Skywalker has his Yoda. Harry Potter has his Dumbledore. Every hero has a mentor. And that hero had to ask for help at some point, right? So if every great hero throughout literature and history had somebody advising or guiding them, it doesn't have to be that hard for us to look at ourselves and be like, yeah, I need somebody to go ahead and teach me how to use that lightsaber, or else I'm going to cut off my own arm.
That's a great way to look at it, because those are maybe they're just easily forgotten in the scheme of things. We remember the overcoming adversity, but we tend to remember the overcoming, the main villain of the story, but we don't remember the personal demons that you had to overcome. I just watched Rocky again for the first time recently. That movie is heavy.
Number
one. It is so much heavier. There is so little boxing in that movie. The amount of personal struggle and relationship issues and drugs, alcohol, and just abusive relationships. It's crazy. I watched. I was like, this is not what I watched this movie for.
It's amazing the more knowledge we gain personally about ourselves, our own insight, psychology, and understanding human dynamics. We go back to those old movies and we're like, oh, that's why this was so amazing. It connected with me on such a deep level. I didn't even notice it. I thought it was just a boxing movie. And no, it goes to those archetypes of heroes and our deep psychology. Oh, it's amazing.
That brings me back to the point that I was just thinking about when it came to, so if people are having a hard time making that step and saying, and maybe it's even financial, maybe it's like, I don't know if I have the money to be able to afford a therapist, or I would suggest, I would bring up this saying, and I'm curious for your input on this. So I love the expression of that which gets measured improves, right? And so if you take an assessment and you have an understanding, you take a legitimate MBTI, which I'm going to ask you for a resource of where people can go to get the best abbreviated and the best full version. How do people do that? But if you're willing to do that, and you're willing to actually read through the material, and so that way you're forsaking for the time being, or you're pushing off that sense of vulnerability of opening up with somebody else, and you just want to maybe you feel more comfortable doing that. There is a sense of awareness that you get about yourself that can start to change the way that you operate, because then you see it on paper. You're like, oh, that makes sense. And then as you start to engage with the world again after that assessment, you're observing. It might even be after the fact. It might even be like you get done with an interaction, you're like, oh, that's why I did that. And then as you have more of these interactions, that what we call in the military right of the boom, like what happens after the event, after the explosion, starts to get its way closer to the boom. And so you're starting to realize in real time as you're reacting a certain way, like, oh, I'm doing the thing. And then you can get to the point when you're a little bit left of the boom, when something's starting to happen. You're like, I'm going to react this way.
I'm going to change my behavior. Yep,
I'm going to change my behavior. Exactly.
The great Dr. Viktor Frankl says, between stimulus and response is our opportunity to choose. And some behavior change is simply realizing between stimulus and response, we need to give ourselves time to choose. Human behavior becomes so automatic. Sometimes we just react. And if we recognize we're reacting in a way we don't want to, we can pause and choose. Okay, how do I want to react differently? And sometimes we need to learn that there are different choices that we can make. And develop different choices, develop different reactions.
Yeah. And seeing it, so that goes to your point. It is hard to break out of the mold of your own behaviors and to understand what else is possible in a vacuum.
Yeah, but it doesn't always take a mentor or coach. Sometimes, they're called self-help books because you can help yourself a little bit, right? Oh, were you going there?
Say books. I was just going to say books.
Books, podcasts, YouTube videos, amazing podcasts like this one, right? Can fill us full of information and ideas that we can, to Sheree's point, we can start to make those changes. Sometimes it helps to have somebody from the outside work with us as well. But yeah, we are very capable. There's so much information out there. Sometimes just the introduction of new information can help inform change.
That's beautiful. How much time do we have left?
Oh, well, here's the thing. I'm supposed to have, I've got to make it into the office. There are people who I think want to spend time with me. I just haven't been able to confirm that today. So there's a good chance I'm going to go to the office and sit by myself and say, goodness, I could have spent more time with Matt just
That's
kind of
okay.
chatting. But what this means is we get to do it again sometime and continue the conversation. This is always a blast.
Yes. I would love to be able to go more into the business side of how we can think about it when we're looking to do what they did in World War II, when MBTI came into existence. How do we incorporate this into hiring? What are strategic ways to think about that? And and I think that there's a lot of room left to play here, but I think we set a really good foundation. I didn't get a single error message during this whole time. Theoretically, everyone's going to be able to see this one.
I love theories. Theories are a beautiful thing, especially when they play out into the real world. We'll see. I can't wait.
It briefs well. We'll see. Thanks, Dan.
Hey, my pleasure. Always a great time.